Hello and welcome to MicroLive. Did you know that your house is already wired for a computerised alarm system and all you have to do is plug in a few of these?
And did you know that we know exactly how many of you are watching us out there? We look at how the size and composition of the television audience is measured.
And from Scotland, a computer terminal which, unlike ordinary bank statements, tells you how much money is really in your bank account.
Thursday evening in the middle of winter. The chances are that in most of these houses there's a television on. And right now, the chances are they're tuned to BBC One. In the 1970s, BBC market researchers had to wait until the next day to find out their audience figures.
Excuse me, good morning. I'm from the BBC. I wondered if I could ask you a couple of questions about your last night's viewing. Did you watch any television last night?
A street interview carefully conducted can be a perfectly valid way of gathering information, but there was always the suspicion people were trying too hard to be helpful.
Yes, that's right.
And as a result, audience figures were perhaps over-optimistic.
Early afternoon.
So, the BBC and ITV companies got together to produce a more reliable system which gathered information as the viewers actually watched. The viewers were a statistical sample chosen to match the overall pattern of households in the UK. But the new method asked a lot of these viewers, who had to fill in diaries every quarter of an hour, noting the number of people in the room and the programme being watched. Hello and welcome to MicroLive. Tonight we'll be giving you some of the reactions to last week's story on electronic snooping. If people were not committed enough, this method could underestimate the number of viewers. And some houses had 2 or 3 televisions and a video recorder, which meant more diaries, more data, and more chance of errors. So the data collection has gone electronic, and the key to the system is this, or rather the fact that the television plugs into the mains. All the sockets in the house are connected via the house wiring. The electricity travelling round the circuit is an alternating current. It varies 50 times every second. Even if this waveform is slightly distorted, all the electrical appliances will still work perfectly normally.
Against disease.
What the new audience research system does is deliberately distort the mains waveform at one point, the television, in a way that can be recognised and read at another, this data recorder. It can read information from up to 4 televisions or video recorders, each of which sends information on specific parts of the signal. So, whichever television you use and wherever you plug it in, as long as it has one of these coding boxes on the back, it can pass on information to this data collector. And the data collector is also a modem. So at about 1 o'clock in the morning, the large computer back at base makes 3,000 telephone calls. That's 1 to each of these units to pick up all the viewing information. And the information is of 2 kinds. The time of day and the channel selected, that's logged automatically whenever the television is on. But the people watching information has to be provided by the people watching. They use this gadget. When the television is first switched on, this display flashes to remind you to key in details of the people in the room. Dan, what do those buttons stand for?
Well, although technically not the head of the household, I'm classed as number 1, my husband number 2, and Roger number 3. The children, although obviously they watch television, are not allocated a number.
Why is that?
Because they're under 4.
Roger, you're number 3. What information does the computer have about you?
Well, it would have that I'm male, my age, 17, and that I'm still at school in full-time education.
Right. Is it easy to use?
Yes, it's very simple, just as you would use a remote control unit for turning the television on or off.
Do you have to do that every time you leave the room, or whenever you come back?
Whenever you leave the room, you have to push your allocated number again, which takes it off the display unit. So that shows that you're not actually in the room watching television. And then if you come back into the room, you push your button again, which puts you back on.
We weren't allowed to film a real survey family since that might affect the figures. Data from this family is not part of the final analysis.
No, it's not. It's actually edited out for this household, principally because I'm a member of AGV. I'm the production manager in charge of the television audience side of the company. And I have the equipment in my household, 1, out of interest, 2, because I would like to experience life as a typical member of our viewing panel. And 3, because I do a lot of experiments with the equipment simply to test the system. And I put in all sorts of unusual viewing circumstances and check it the following day at the office to see whether the equipment has properly recorded some of the strange things I've done at home.
AGB's headquarters are in West London, and every night the dedicated minicomputer phones out to the survey houses on 20 lines. The whole process, with redials if lines are busy, can take up to 3 hours. The following morning, a limited analysis is available to those advertisers who are prepared to pay for it, and AGB are expanding the system.
One example I can give you is something that we'll be starting later this year, setting up a panel of homes with video recorders where when they use the video to record an off-air program, we will be putting a signal, we call it a fingerprint, onto the videotape. When they play that tape back, we will read the signal off, and that will tell us, when they're playing video, exactly what they're watching, when it was recorded, what channel it was recorded on, and so on. So we can look at so-called video time shifting to see how often people watch programs that they've recorded, how long is the delay, are they skipping forward through commercial breaks, and all the sorts of things that the advertising industry wants to know.
There's no doubt that the new system produces more reliable information, but the way the various companies interpret those figures will probably remain as dubious as ever.
Lies, damn lies, and statistics. I wonder what Disraeli, who first coined that phrase, would have made of the announcement that more than half the nation watched EastEnders on Christmas Day. Now, using the mains to send information is becoming a standard practice. Baby alarms like this have been sending the sound of crying children around the wiring for several years. You simply plug in the microphone into the baby's room and then the loudspeaker into any other room, and you can listen to what the baby's doing. And now you can use the mains wiring to carry all sorts of other information around the house as well.
When home computers were first launched, part of the sales blurb was that they could be used for controlling things in the home, like turning on an electric blanket when it became too cold, or closing the curtains when it gets dark. The reality was that nobody used them for this. You needed a lot of extra electronics and relays and so on before you could even turn on a kettle with your computer. You also needed an awful lot of specially installed wiring to carry control commands around the house. As a result, do-it-yourself home control systems were often messy, unreliable, and potentially quite dangerous. But now, that's all changed with these red boxes. They transmit signals down the mains wiring like the baby alarm, so no special cabling is necessary. So how do they work? Well, what we have here is a control box called a red leader. It has a computer processor with some memory, and to make it work, you have to connect it to your home computer. Effectively, you're using your micro as a terminal to the control computer. The red leader can monitor signals from other red boxes and send messages to them as well. The great thing is that the only connection you need between the boxes is the mains wiring. Of course, one of the problems with sending messages around your mains wiring is that the messages, like the wiring, don't stop at your front door. They'll pass out under the street and probably still be readable on the mains electricity in houses 2 or 3 doors down the road. To stop you turning on your neighbour's remote-controlled B-Day by mistake, the red boxes each have a unique identifier. It's rather like a telephone number, except you won't quite find a telephone number as long as this one, and they'll only respond to messages which start with their own number. Well, all this is very clever, but what can you use it for? Probably the best application for these boxes would be as a simple, cheap home security system. You plug in an alarm like this one into this red box, which is a switchable mains socket. And then we're going to set this red box to detect the movement of warm bodies, and I'm going to use it to protect that picture over there. I clip it on this thing and point it towards the picture like this, and then plug it into the nearest mains socket, like that. Then I've got to write a line of software for this computer which says, if sensor sees burglar, then switch on alarm, and you've got a burglar alarm. Well, let's see if I can make it work. The software that comes with the system uses menus, so it's fairly easy to set up. What we've done is to tell the control box about the alarm. This column tells us that it's off at the moment, which it is, and we could use the timer to operate the alarm, but we want it to be operated by the sensor. So we need to tell the control box about the sensor. Well, I've already entered most of the sensor number, this gigantic number in here. I want to complete that, and it'll start to produce the sensor. We're using a BBC Micro, so the software also works on the Commodore and the Spectrum. Well, now the control box knows about the alarm and the sensor. What we have to do is to tell the control box to switch on the alarm when it receives a signal from the sensor. First of all, I've got to set it up, so I set the whole system to off. And then I'm going to move the cursor onto the alarm. I want to access an auxiliary device, which in this case is the sensor, number 2, and the whole thing should be primed. Lesley, let's see if you can steal my picture.
OK, here I go. In for the steal. No chance, it works.
Terrific. Well, it actually works. As the system is controlled by a computer program, we can install other sensors operating at different times and tailor the system exactly to the needs of my house. And if you're a real techie, you can get access to the control language called Red Basic and make the system work in any way you want. After you set the system up, you can disconnect your micro and leave the red boxes to run independently. But to reset them, you'd need to reconnect your micro again. Well, it's also possible to use the mains for sending data between 2 microcomputers without any extra wiring. The output from this micro is connected to the mains by this red box. There's the output from the micro, and there's the mains lead. And over there, Lesley's micro is also plugged in, and I can send her this message. Just for a bit of fun, we can plug in this baby alarm into the mains and listen to the data being transmitted to Lesley's micro. Well, there's Lesley's screen, and here comes the message.
Yeah, I heard it. I read it. 12 red boxes today. Thanks, Mac. Romance.
Thank you, Lesley. Well, of course, its use is limited. Each micro needs the appropriate software. Only one person can send information at once, and it's fairly slow.
Not only that, as Mac just demonstrated, supposing the people next door had a baby alarm, like the one he showed, well, they'd think their baby was bleeping. And if they used red boxes as well as you, then both their system's response time and yours would be slowed down. So any serious user would have to use one of these. It's a mains filter, and that could turn out to be rather costly. So, although Red Leader looks as approachable as a set of Carmen rollers, be warned, you do need some techie know-how to cope with it. But at least it's a start towards using your micro to run things for you at home.
Business used to be a simple matter of counting what you produced and then selling it. But modern business has to worry about checks and the accuracy of the British bank statement. Colin Marshall manages a plastics company, and he has to keep his attention fixed firmly on its cash flow.
Well, cash flow is far more important now than it ever was before. You could have a very good and successful business before, but if the cash flow, i.e. the ability to pay the bills from your suppliers, wasn't correct, it would mean that a successful company could fail just by badly managing its money. Cash flow is the ability to make sure that you have money available to pay for the supplies and the labour that you need when you need it.
Colin's main concern must be to keep the factory working. Making plastic is the easy part. The difficult bit is getting the cash flow balanced and making sure that any cash surplus is making money for him and not his bank.
We buy plastic raw material like this, which is our major cost, and we process it on machines like this to produce components like this that we sell to our customers as soon as possible. The sooner we can sell it, the better for our cash flow.
The Bank of Scotland now supplies a terminal which takes much of the guesswork out of Colin's balancing act. It's the only service available to small businesses to show the actual amount of money that's really in their bank account. This means that Colin and his accountant, Ian Stedman, can't be misled by the figures on the traditional bank statement. When a cheque is deposited in your bank, the bank tells you that that cheque has been received by showing it on your bank statement, even though that money is not yet in your account. Clearing a cheque that's paid into your account means that it has to travel all the way back to the payer's bank to make sure that there is money available to cover it. This can take 3 or 4 days. So although your statement says that you have the money the moment you hand in your cheque, in fact, that money isn't yours to spend for another 3 days. This screen shows Colin and Ian what will be happening to their account over the next 5 days. Cheques they are paying out are in red. Cheques coming to them are in the next column in white. The all-important figures are in the final column, and there is often a large difference between them. The top figure in each section shows the amount of money that would appear on their bank statement. The bottom figure shows the amount that has actually reached their account. This means that Ian knows how much money Colin really has to play with on any particular day.
As you can see, we've got cleared balances in the 2 main current accounts approaching £10,000, despite the figures that they say will appear in the statements. Now, the forthcoming bank holiday, we want to ship the money into the investment account to get the interest for the 3 days. It's better having it there than having it in the bank where the current accounts don't earn us an interest, just make money for the bank.
Right, but we're not leaving ourselves short. We don't have to pay any suppliers and no other cheques we need to pay out.
Well, suppliers are mostly English and they'll be on holiday next week and they won't know anything about it. And we can still programme any funds you have to pay out on Tuesday, and we can put the money in on Tuesday by transferring it back out. It's basically the electricity board, telephone, and a supplier. He'll have his money by next Friday.
Right, well, he'll be happy.
He'll be happy and she'll still supply us. The others, they don't call for it till next week. They can pay it out on Tuesday. They'll get it by the end of the week and we can cover the funds. We'll still have the benefit of £10,000, which the bank won't have for the weekend.
Right.
Before we had this system, which we got about last October, when we wrote out a cheque to pay a supplier, we had to write the money off the account. Whether he cashed it in 3 days or in 10 days, some even took up to 3 weeks. The money was off our account. We could no longer use it. Therefore, we couldn't put it on deposit. Since we've had this system, we have been able to watch out for funds coming through and therefore take money from the investment account to cover particular cheques.
We've probably got more to gain than other banks by having a home and office banking service. Our established market was Scotland with a population of 5 million or thereabouts. If we can expand that into England, we immediately have access to 10 times that number of people. And that's very, very important. It doesn't work the other way around. If your existing market is already 50 million, there's not the same emphasis as to go into another 5 million. I think banks are becoming much, much more open all the way along. I think that's adequately illustrated by the sort of things that we show on home and office banking. That for the first time, we do show a daily accrual of interest and charges that have accumulated on the account. And we're quite happy to do so.
Well, why are you happy to do so, and why aren't other banks offering this facility?
Maybe you should ask them then.
Well, this is a really nice piece of musical software written for the Commodore Amiga, and it uses the Amiga's existing sound facilities, so there's no add-ons in sight. And it is extremely simple to use. It has been written for the complete musical and technical moron. Well, the first thing you get is a selection of pre-programmed backing tracks. You've got choices like Avant Rock, Bow Pop, Good Groove. I mean, how could you go wrong with titles like that? Let's give you a little taste. This is going to be Bow Pop. Now, if you've got a bit of musical knowledge yourself, you can also create your own backing tracks. Either way, you see the chords of the backing track displayed up at the top there. The music itself is represented by these coloured blobs. Each instrument is a different colour, and in this case, electric bass is blue, drum kit yellow, and the higher up the screen the blobs appear, then the higher the notes. But the fun really starts for you amateur musicians when you use something called the Mouse Jam facility. Now, for this, you use the mouse, yes, and this allows you to actually improvise all around the backing track by simply pressing a key on the mouse and moving the mouse around, like so. Come to think of it, this sounds a bit like a singing mouse or a pig, but this is in fact their version of the voice, the human voice, and they give you, I think it's 19 options of different musical sounds to choose from. Now, I've always wanted to be a solo saxophone player. There's the sax. Let's see how that sounds. Right. My first ever sax solo. It's not bad, actually. Now, for those of you with musically sensitive ears, of course, I apologise, but you've got to admit, I didn't play any wrong notes. All the notes I played fitted into the chord sequence. Now, I don't know what notes I was playing because I don't read music, but if I wanted to find out, I could very easily, because the notes are displayed here, down the left-hand side of the screen. Those are, in fact, the notes of the chord, but I'll just activate my saxophone, and you see the notes there registering very quickly. Now, how does this do this? The software is the answer. It really looks after you in that it will only let you play notes that harmonise with the chords. Let's see if I can show you what I mean. I'm just going to keep my finger down on the mouse, and I'm not moving the mouse at all, as you can see from the cursor, but if you notice, the note is actually changing along with the chord as it changes. And the software will continue to do this regardless of how wildly you play your mouse. So it always keeps you in tune. It really is a fun way to pretend to be a musician, and you never know, you might just pick up a bit of basic musical knowledge as well.
Setting up a business is never easy, and Dundee is not the most prosperous city in Scotland. 10 years ago, John Wilson was a graduate student at Dundee University. To supplement his income, he taught himself to repair jewellery. That earned him a few pounds. Today, John's business has an annual turnover of over £500,000. He's still in the same trade, but repairing jewellery is now just a sideline. His real business is selling it. John opened a shop in an indoor centre in the middle of the city, but its position in a market at the back of the centre was not ideal. The only way to attract customers was to make sure that the jewellery they wanted was always on display. But that involved guesswork, and it meant stocking far too many different designs.
One of the problems with any jeweller shop is that you've got to stock at least 2,000 lines to offer a comprehensive range to the customers. We, in fact, were stocking 6,500 different stock items. That presented its own problems. The major problems were this. To look after 6,500 lines, you need a vast number of people adding them, counting the stock, checking the stock. Our stock records were always way behind our actual physical stock check. We did not know what was selling in what quantities and who we'd got it from quickly enough. We needed accurate information to do the correct buying, to do the correct marketing, to do the correct promotions. The business was being run very, very badly. In fact, the business was running us, and we were not running the business.
The answer was to get information about sales and stock much more rapidly, and that meant installing a computerized stock control system. But although it's a small shop, only a large and expensive system could cope with the thousands of different lines. It was a difficult decision to make that investment. The package chosen cost over £60,000, but it has allowed the whole sales process to be properly integrated. Now the cash registers record all of the details of each sale electronically and pass them to a central computer for analysis.
I had no previous computer experience whatsoever. The limit of my experience was with a small Spectrum computer, which I didn't understand and couldn't really use. We've purchased this very large computer system. It's probably a system that's much bigger than you would anticipate to see in originally a single shop. We had so many stock lines and wanted to do so much that the system had to be initially very large and very expandable.
The computer looks after all the stock records for the shop, and that alone is useful, but its real value lies in the sales reports that it produces. These identify the performance of every one of the designs in stock.
Without the computer, it would never have been possible for us to really establish what was selling and what was not selling. I don't think it's humanly possible to look after 6,500 lines. Even 1,000 lines becomes totally impractical. We previously were essentially having the wrong information fed back to us. The information we were getting was subjective. If I was in the shop and happened to sell 2 of something, I then thought that that was a line that the customers were buying. That turned out to be, in most instances, completely erroneous. we now have objective information. We have the correct answers to our buying decisions and our stocking decisions. A combination of all these factors has allowed us to display the goods that the customers want to buy. The traditional conservative jeweller would stock from silver plate through to quality jewellery, expensive diamond rings, and all the other things that are associated with the jewellers. Some of these things are not profitable to stock, both in terms of physical space if you have a small shop. We've looked at the items that we're selling that our public, that our customers want to buy, and they range from some very inexpensive things, but because there is an element of volume in them, they become profitable to stock and profitable sell. These are things that the customers want to buy, and previously we would have neglected them, both in terms of promoting them and pushing them and putting them in window display space. So that we now have a more balanced view that really it's what we ought to be stocking, solely what the customers want to buy, not what the traditional jeweller wants to sell.
John has done more than just run the original software, he's also adapted it. His stock is particularly sensitive to changes in fashion. Because of the shop's position, he stocks mainly small items, so the sales needed to be monitored very closely. John has developed his own ways of analysing the data and has learned how to manipulate the software to build them into the computer's reports. He can, for example, look at sales over much shorter periods than before and spot designs that are just starting to become popular. The reports now reveal rapid changes in fashion, and that's given John an edge over his competitors. He's even discovered that he can use the reports to work out the best positions to place each item in the displays. By putting best-selling designs in a different position each month and getting the computer to analyse the result, it's been possible to find out which display positions are most noticed by the customers. And they're not always obvious.
We've realised there were hotspots in the window displays, best-selling positions in the window displays that you could sell anything from. And so it seemed to us logical that we should put in those best-selling areas the goods that the public wanted to buy. They were easiest for them to see, they were obviously in the best-selling location, and so it seemed natural to put them there, and it enhanced the sales quite dramatically.
John Wilson no longer has to gamble on what his customers want. The computer tells him. He's cut the number of designs he stocks by half, yet sales have gone up by over 50%. Above all, the computer has replaced guesswork with a high degree of precision.
It is a very powerful tool. We now, although can't write very clever reports, we can write reports that are very, very pertinent to our business, which are going to make the business successful, profitable, and more important, are going to give us lots of happy customers.
Next week, it's the Which Computer Show at the National Exhibition Centre near Birmingham. It runs from Tuesday to Saturday, and on Tuesday evening, the winners of the Rita Awards, that's the awards for recognition of information technology achievement, are going to be announced. And Gemini Jewellers, who we've just seen, are in fact nominated for an award in the User of the Year category. Anyway, we wish them luck.
That's it for this week. Next week, we'll be joined by Professor Michael Brady from Oxford University, and we'll be looking, amongst other things, at robots which can run, jump, and even beat you at ping pong.
Until then, goodbye.